I just want to say one word to you. Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Plastics.
We are listening, Dustin Hoffman's friend. Now, we know that plastics are a big problem today, but who is trying to make them a bigger problem tomorrow? To start, where does plastic come from? Well, it comes from petrochemicals, right? Oil used in chemical production, which means that plastic comes from the oil industry. So regardless of today's record high prices, the oil and gas industry is on the decline, right? With demand set to peak around 2025. But the oil industry has a grand plan to win our hearts and our wallets back, and that is through plastics. And just like Dustin Hoffman's friend said, plastics are everywhere, right? Just to name a few, they are in detergent, they're in coffee cups, not just the lids, cigarette butts, clothing, water, beer, chewing gum, tires. That makes sense, right? Glitter, tea bags. Tea bags is nothing safe. But plastic demand is still on the rise. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, some estimates say that plastic use has gone up by 250 to 300%. So it makes sense that the oil and gas industry is supposedly doubling down on plastics, with BP themselves coming out and saying that between 2020 and 2040, plastics demand is going to drive up to 95% of net growth in demand for oil. And just like this guy, the oil and gas industry has been quietly betting on plastics for decades, even going as far as to allegedly mislead the public as to the efficacy of recycling as a means to get consumers to buy more and more plastic. So we've been told that recycling is our salvation. After all, it is one of the 3 R's. But the reality is that under 10% of all plastics ever produced have been recycled. And this is against a backdrop of this industry knowing about the shortcomings of recycling, allegedly all the way back in 1974. The oil and gas industry has poured millions into propagating this narrative. The American Petroleum Institute spent $663 million on PR and marketing alone between 2008 and 2017. And a council of plastic producing companies spent millions putting in recycling programs when their own scientists were telling them that recycling was not going to work at scale in the way that it needed to, which is ridiculous. And the American Chemistry Council, that's a lot of councils, spent $16 million on lobbying the US government in 2021 alone. The results of all this is that we now have a broken recycling system, which results in more plastic ending up in our air and in our water. And without intervention, this issue is going to continue to get worse and worse as oil and gas industries continue to increase their investment in plastics. Now, because it is in their financial interest, these companies are going to increasingly lobby against plastic-free efforts. So as we go into Plastic-Free July, know that our addiction to plastic is not a coincidence. It is the product of a long-standing game that these guys have been playing since before Dustin Hoffman's friend gave him that sage advice.
Plastics.